Thank you so much for joining tonight's event, Tactile Storytelling, a conversation on memory and material. Before we start, I'd like to mention that live captioning is available and you can enable it by clicking on the closed captions at the bottom of your screen. And for real-time captions, please click the link in the chat. My name is Anna Saigi and I am the director of Slash. My visual description is as follows. I'm a Turkish woman with long brown hair and I am wearing a green cardigan. There are wooden bookshelves behind me. I'm tuning in from the Slash Gallery in San Francisco, which is located on the unceded land of the Ramaytush Ohlone people. Tonight's conversation, moderated by Isha Rosemond, will be featuring April Bey, Adebunmi Gbadebo, and Ashara Ekundayo. After the conversation, there will be a short Q&A session, and we invite you to submit all your questions via the chat function. The conversation, including the Q&A, will be recorded, so if you wish to remain anonymous, please make sure to turn off your camera and change your name to *. Tonight's event is happening in conjunction with Solve to Catch Ghosts, the group exhibition created by Ashara Ekundayo, which is on view at Slash through December 17th. Solve to Catch Ghosts features large-scale installation and photography, textile and video works by 9 artists living and working in the Bay Area and across the US. These artists are Georgia Abbott, April Bey, Kantira Davis, Shanika Gay, Adebunmi Gbadebo, Courtney Desiree Morris, Sabrina Nelson, Branty Velez, and Sarah Kernan. Sarah Kernan created an accompanying soundtrack for the exhibition, engaging themes of saltwater. We now like to share a short clip of one of the Solve to Catch Ghosts artists, Sabrina Nelson, who was filmed during the opening night of the exhibition.
So my name is Sabrina Nelson, and my work ties into the theme of the show, Salt to Catch Ghost, because I'm coming from a very salty taste in my mouth of how people take the lives of people who don't look like them and maybe don't come from where they come from. Watching on social media as Philandel Castile was killed, thinking about Emmett Till, thinking about Rainisha McBride, thinking about Brianna, thinking about children and adults who are always someone's child, and thinking about the salt in the wound, if you will, that's not healing us. And so this is my way of creating magic, if you will, to teach someone empathy, to show them a mirror of themselves and how it must look like to see the reflection of who you really are as a country. And how do you change it? People want change, but they don't want to change. So it is my task to show them the reflection of how I see it and maybe give them an opportunity to think about how to change it.
The exhibition was organized with the help of Isha Rosemond. I would now like to introduce Isha. Isha Rosemond is an Asian American post-disciplinary artist whose works use somatic poetry to explore the distance between colonial documentation and African diasporic truth-telling. Isha is the founder of the Black Freedom Fellowship, an international residency that offers resources for BIPOC artists and activists to create vital features. They are a 2022 creator in residence at SOMAR San Francisco, 2022 artist in residence at Mirante Shiki in Bahia, Brazil, and a 2021 California Artist Council Individual Artist Fellow. Hello, Isha.
Peace, Anna. Thank you so much. I'm so happy, y'all. Y'all have no idea how beautiful it is to me that regardless of the times that we are in, we still find ways to subvert, this idea of distance So I'm really happy that all of y'all took the time to join today. And a special thank you to, of course, the Chef Bryant Terry and Four Color Books for making sure that this conversation could happen in a way where people were paid equitably. So my name is Isha Rosemond. My pronouns are they, them. And my visual description is that I am a dark-skinned queer person sitting in a brightly lit room with a yellow head wrap, a septum piercing and a nose ring, and a tie-dye shirt that is turquoise yellow, black, and red. And I'm joining right now from Salvador, Brazil in Bahia. And right outside of my window is the Atlantic Ocean, and it's really warm and kind of humid. And now I'll begin by reading the bios of a few of the artists that you're gonna hear today who are from the Salt to Catch Ghost exhibition. And I'll start out by reading the bio of April Bey. Grew up in the Bahamas in New Providence and lives in Los Angeles, California. She is a visual artist and art educator whose interdisciplinary work is an introspective and social critique of American and Bahamian culture, feminism, generational theory, social media, Afrofuturism, Afro-surrealism, post-colonialism, and constructs of race within supremacist systems. Her work has been exhibited internationally and in 7 solo exhibitions to date, and is in the collections of the California African American Museum, the National Art Gallery of the Bahamas, and more. Bey is currently a tenured professor at Glendale College and represented by Turn Gallery, the Bahamas, and Gavlak Gallery, Los Angeles. Now for Adebunmi. Adebunmi Gbadebo is a New Jersey-born and Philadelphia-based artist whose work centers on deeply resonant materials such as indigo, human hair, and clay hand-dug from plantations. Her practice tends to the stories of ancestors, families, and individuals, either long overlooked or too closely surveilled. Gbadebo earned her BFA at the School of Visual Arts, New York. Her work is currently being shown at the Metropolitan Museum of Art and is included in the permanent collection of the Smithsonian National Museum of African Art, Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture, and the Boston Museum of Fine Arts, among others. And now for Ashara Ekundayo, the curator of the Salt to Catch Ghost exhibition. Ashara Ekundayo is a queer Black feminist, interdisciplinary, independent curator, visual maker, cultural theologian, arts organizer, and strategist whose creative practice is deeply rooted in joy-informed pedagogies and the study and creation of Black archives, site-responsive ceremony, and the specific expertise of Black women of the African diaspora. She is the founder of the philanthropic organization Artists as First Responder and has collaborated with artists and institutions, including the Museum of the African Diaspora, the SF MoMA, and Black Space Residency. Ashara currently lives and works between the San Francisco Bay Area and her hometown of Detroit, Michigan. Ashe, Ashe, what it do, Ashara? Hey. How you doing?
What up, though?
What up, though? Man, I'm just so happy to have you here and to know that, you know, Adebunmi, April, and I are all kind of circulating around you as a part of this exhibition. And I wanted to take a moment to just like start out and just ask you from your perspective, like, what is this exhibition about? What is the Salt to Catch Ghost exhibition about?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's good to be here with you as well, and good to see you, Isha, in this role. I'm really excited and proud of you to be circling up as a curator yourself. And just also want to just acknowledge the land that I'm on right now. I'm in Oakland, California, which is the unceded and stolen indigenous land of the Ohlone people, the Ramatash and Ransomanoli people who are still here, still stewarding the land, still loving us, and also honoring and acknowledging our African ancestors that keep us on this path, keep us in remembrance and reverence. And so we're doing that work that they be pleased. Let's see, what is Salt to Catch Ghost about? That it's a wide question with a wide answer that is not compact or tidy for you, but it is about the materiality and the magic of the creation and the recipes and the remedies of Black women and film artists, our labor, our dreams, our musings, and our conjurings. It is about water. No water, no salt. It is about the flow and the divine feminine in all beings that are human. It is about the beings that we can't see as well, and those that are not human. So it's our relationship to both the material of the earth, how she holds us up, the material that we manipulate, that nature offers us, and the way in which we engage each other through both flavor, through medicine, through art and creativity, through poetry, through song, and through movement.
Yeah, thank you for that. And, thinking of you and this response of there is no salt without water, and just the intentionality you have of bringing water, bringing libation into so much of your work, and the intentionality that you have. I think whenever I talk to you, even just now, I'm like, let me take a deep breath. Like I feel the water, I feel the flow. And, it's making me think too about just your curation practice as a whole. And, you and I have had a lot of private conversations, and one of them was like a couple weeks ago about that, like, curators don't necessarily have to pay to like meet an artist. I was like, wait, I thought that that's what curation was, is that like you pay a museum to like do a show there. And, something that you've really shown me is the importance of like relationships and the importance of actually like loving what you do so much. You can like keep it in your memory. So I'm curious about like your process in like curating this show, and like, how did you select the art? And like, how did you select, which artist would even be a part of such a transformative show?
Thank you for that thick question. My process is pretty wide in the sense that I'm always in the process of curating an exhibit. I'm always in the process of curating a conversation. I'm always in the process of thinking about the connections between artists and their work, which means I'm often on studio visits. I still take studio visits. I call artists. I ask if I can come visit them, if I can sit with them. And that happens whether or not I have a show in mind or have been offered a space to curate a show or put together some kind of programming for it. So, for instance, there's some artists in the show who I've actually never met in person, like April Bey. I've never met them in person. So, we've had a conversation. I've hosted them in one of the forums, the blatant forums that I was doing with the Museum of the African Diaspora over the last 2 years. But we've actually never met in person. I saw their work at the California African American Museum and was just literally turned out the first, just kind of walk through their solo show and became obsessed, and then proceeded to like DM them on IG until they responded to me, which they did. So I didn't have a show in mind. I just knew that I wanted to show April Bey's work, and I wanted to see more of their work, and I wanted other people to see their work. Because it had such a strong impact on me, my first experience with it, versus Kentura Davis, who I've known for some years and have visited her many times in her home in Los Angeles. I was in LA earlier in the year and just said, hey, can I come over? And at that time, she was working on a very huge commission piece, which was just unveiled last week. It was a piece of Adebunmi for the National Portrait Gallery. And that piece was on the wall. She was working on that. And then I asked her if I could show some of the work from her solo show at her gallery, Matthew Brown, that I had seen earlier in the year, which were a series of portraits. And the ones that were available and the ones that were like easy for me to access was the one that I selected. There's like, you can pick from the ones that I showed in my solo show, which would you like to show? So there's a combination of things that happen. Sometimes it's what is available, sometimes it's what's being worked on. And so my process is about the relationship and the conversation with the artist. And it's either yes, yes, or no, no, meaning, yes, I have something and yes, you may see it, or yes, I have something and I'm not ready to show you, or no, I don't have anything, but I'll work on something, or no, I don't have anything right now. And, let's talk about it at a later date. So yes, yes, or no, no is how this process for this exhibition happened, but it's generally how I work. In terms of how you pick, or how things were selected, it's a combination of what is available and what is offered, and what pieces I think will work in conversation with the other pieces.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, in addition to that water, I think there's also like the shape of the flow, right? Like the intentionality of having time, like especially with you as an curator. And it's my understanding that you've never worked like as an employee within like a museum, and having to like interface with that as like a Black person, and like bringing like really exuberantly Black things to these spaces. And I think another part of Blackness too is this intention. It's this like, I'm gonna take my time and I'm gonna remember that 10 years ago, this artist who I love, who had the passion, who had the intention, was making something that now goes here. And, I also love the way that you talk about everyone's work in the show, and in particular, Adebunmi's work, who I know you've been able to see and touch and connect with. Adebunmi's work from one of their earlier pieces to going to the Met like a couple weeks ago and being like, oh man. So
yeah, that's a really special thing that that Bumi shared with me. I think maybe last week, maybe it was a couple of weeks ago, and maybe she'll talk about it with us. But that one of the pieces that's hanging in Slash right now at the Salt to Catch Ghosts exhibition is actually Dada is the first piece that they did with hair. So, and when we were opening up the box and I was touching it and, holding the locks in my hair, she let me know that you're only the second person to ever install this piece. I've always been the one who's installed this piece. So I felt deeply humbled and very special by that, to have had that time to like just be with that material, be with that hair, and how special that felt to me to be holding, the just kind of like the DNA of so many people in my hands, and then figuring out how to be very careful and mindful about how to install it in the way in which was appropriate, in the way in which she asked us to install it, as you know, and then to last week be in New York for a week and making sure that I went over to the Metropolitan Museum of Art to see the really spectacular show and the way in which Adebunmi's work is also part of that exhibition. And she said, and that is the most recent hair work. So to have the first hair work and the most recent hair work to hold, that tension and to hold that space with such care and admiration, indeed, it is my true humble privilege to be able to like be in that kind of relationship with artists. And Bumi and I met, I don't know, a year and a half ago in Detroit.
Yeah.
know. In the D with our dear friend Sabrina Nelson, who was in the show, and my sister of a very long time, Jessica Caramore, who's a poet and a performer and a rock star at this point. So yeah, it is about the relationships. It's all about them, and you know, so they're very patient and long, and you know, I'm not in a rush. I'm not a curator who's in a rush. I don't feel the push to be like the first, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, I think what's coming up for me as you're talking is I'm like, time is the material, man. And, you know, I think, you know, April, whenever I see your work too, I'm thinking about how deeply intentional it is. Like, of course, the scale of it, but the detail of like actually including also like hand sewn pieces within the details. And Adebunmi also like with, there was a video that I was watching about your work. It's called the Indigo Blues. And yeah, you were talking about this process of like making paper, and then I would just love for you to go into that. But maybe before I step into that, I could start by asking you, Adebunmi, like, how do you define material, and what materials do you use in your art?
Yeah, so I guess when I started thinking about material more, first let me start off with I'm a Black woman with brown locks that are pulled to one side. I'm wearing a pink sweater with a V-neck neckline. I have on a necklace and Black nail polish. When I started thinking about material more deeply was a moment I had in art school as an undergraduate at the School of Visual Arts. And it was a moment in my art history class where my professor introduced within the art historical canon, it was the first painting of a Black woman. And she was met with the white woman. It was the painting Olympia by Edward Manet. And I very vividly remember like how my professor described the painting, the details in which he described the painting. He described the white woman in like a lot of detail, the Black cat, the shoes she wore, the fabrics in the painting, and kind of brushed over or made invisible the Black figure. And sitting in the class as the only Black woman, it's almost like he made, in that act of making this Black woman in the painting invisible, I became very invisible, as well as very hyper aware of my Blackness. So it was like this visibility that was happening. But because particularly that painting is about the history of paint and seeing how like with kind of this telling of this history, this canon, how this material paint possessed in it, this kind of exclusion of us. I think in that moment, it made like paint as a material was no longer neutral. And thinking about kind of this loadedness that's in material, these histories that are in material, I kind of went to what materials are kind of really grounded and rooted in me and my Black body and my histories. And here is literally our history. It is our DNA. It is our Black bodies. It comes from these it kind of shifts even how I think of like where I get supplies. The supply is in this like kind of space between a barber and the little Black boy that he shaves his head, that I'm getting the material from the act of someone in the shower, washing their hair, that kind of private, these like private Black moments and public Black moments. And I think that kind of just thinking of like kind of these histories that lay or that exist within material kind just grew into me thinking about indigo and the histories that are within it when I learned that my family was enslaved on an indigo plantation and rice plantation. So thinking about the histories and the memory that is in indigo, that is in rice, that is in our hair. And then eventually, because of, I guess, the failure of history or the failure of archive and in the ways in which it captures or doesn't capture our humanness, our humanity, especially within like looking at like the history of slavery and how that is archived. When the archive failed to kind of include our Black body, when the archive failed, I went to ground. Similarly to that moment in that classroom when art history failed, when that history failed to kind of make present our Black bodies, I went to our Black bodies for material.
Yes, yes, for real. I'm gonna let that breathe. April, I'm curious also about, so how do you define materials and what materials do you most, frequently use in your art?
Wow. Hi, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to participate and be in this space with you. My visual descriptors are, I am a cute, chubby, light-skinned Black woman from the Caribbean, and I have reddish brown afro rocket right now with a black and white turtleneck sweater and a black and white abstract African shawl. And I'm sitting on a teal couch in front of a tapestry piece showing two queer men, pink and blue, with a Black woman's hand as the decorative feature on their clothes in overalls with acrylic nails. Okay. How do you define materials? Honestly, I started concentrating on materials when I was in art school as well, for similar reasons, because my issue was that I was the scholarship student, fresh off the boat from the Caribbean, and I couldn't afford a lot of the supplies, and I went to a school that was very discipline specific. And I understand that now because I'm a teacher. So I understand like a lot of the processes they show you in school is like a recipe. So all of the students have to get the same supplies so that they can reproduce what they learn in class, right? But I couldn't afford the supplies. So I was trying to get away with like dollar store brand paints and like stealing like free supplies from like a different discipline to mix in with, like, I was a drawing major. And then I got to grad school and I really struggled because the program was supposedly interdisciplinary, right? But I kept getting policed in like what materials and processes I could mix together. And in particular, my use of color was a problem the first 2 years I was in grad school because people kept saying, oh, it's designy, it's so pretty. And I needed to give a justification on why I was using those colors. And I literally had to go home and like drive through my neighborhood that I grew up in to realize that like our house was teal at one point, and then we painted it Pepto-Bismol pink, and our neighbor's house was canary yellow, and like our gates are blue because we emulate the colors that grow naturally. Like we have bougainvillea growing everywhere like a weed. So it's like, I felt like at that moment, I don't need to justify why I make the aesthetic choices I do, because I feel like a lot of the rules that we get taught in these institutions were created by people who don't look like us, and they weren't meant for us. And so I learned what I needed to learn. And so now in my own practice, I do mix a lot of materials, and sometimes it's not safe all the time, but that's a part of my practice, is to learn on my own. And then I feel like I have more authority when I put it out there. So the materials I like to use in my work, at one point, I was mixing flour and salt to make puffy paint. And then when it dries, all you see is the salt crystals. I was using caulking when I was doing like heavy feminist work. I wanted to paint with caulk. So I was painting with caulking, and I wanted to do sewing, but I wanted to juxtapose it with like a masculine or a perceived stereotypical masculine way of working with the material. So I started drilling holes and sewing into wood and sewing into resin. And I also make the output of the art has to be conceptually relevant with the material and process. So if I want to do traditional printmaking with a press or silk screening, it's going to be to make advertisements or digital or print media like magazines or zines. I work in consumer grade customizable gifts, like that category. I find really, really interesting, because you can get like anything printed on a thong, on a coffee cup, on a backpack. And in particular, I focus on the blankets because for my culture, and also I was happy to discover in the African American culture, they're gifted to someone you love, right? Or they're created to memorialize someone, but it always has someone's face on it. And oftentimes we give that person's face to the person we love. And I find that concept so interesting, because it's what me and my friends do on another level too. Like on social media, you can tell when someone loves someone when they post a picture of them, how that person is it's usually like a non-posed image. For me, it's me ready to eat, and they're like, hold on, let me take pictures. Or forcing you to stand in front of your art, like the proud parent, right? So I've started taking pictures on the other side of that when they're like, April, look. And I'm like, okay, hold on. So I can take a picture of them, and their face usually looks like a proud parent. And so now I'm moving into material and process in terms of visualizing love, like non-traditional love. Like, this is my friend, look at my friend. I'm going to take a picture of my friend and like go through the process of ordering this customizable product, and I'm going to give it to them for their birthday or for Christmas. And I'm really interested in that. Not so romantic, but very deep and intimate and platonic love. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. What about you, Ashara? How do you define materials, and what are you currently working with in your art, in your practice?
I don't have a definition for what defines material, because it's all material. In my art practice, which is still primarily a curatorial practice, it is an art form within itself for those of us who are curators and who hold and create space. Space is the material for me, primarily. And in my visual art practice, it is paper. So I work with paper. As a collector, I collect paper, works on paper. I do silk screen. I also do woodblock print, which ends up being on paper as well. And then found objects, things that are part of altars, part of I want to say site responsive and sometimes site specific spaces that are built on the street in partnership and collaboration with other artists, often with other poets. And then water is a material that I use often in my work. And work that is connected to or needs water to kind of manifest or womanifest itself. Like indigo needs water, for instance, and I work with indigo. I collect indigo. I have a relationship with cotton and specifically with the indigo plant and the color blue, which again goes back to water. So I'm sitting here just as a visual description, which I'm sorry I didn't give earlier. I'm a dark-skinned Black person with a majority shaved head. I have locked hair in the back of my head. I have on tortoiseshell glasses that are pretty thick brimmed. I have on black and blue lipstick, and I have on a blue and white shirt with a big print, and I have a tattoo on my neck and my chest, and small silver earrings. But I'm sitting here with like pieces of indigo that I've collected from around the world. This is a striped piece, light blue and dark blue shawl. This is a piece that I bought in New York last week on the street corner in front of the Museum of Modern Art. Just brought it from a brother who was outside selling continental African art. I have blue shawls. And so the material is blue. It is water, it is paper, it is cotton. It is found and it is sacred. Yeah. And thank you for people who are telling me where they are. I was very interested in who is in the circle this evening. I'm really happy that we're having a regular Zoom, and so that everyone can see who's there, and maybe at some point people will even show us their face.
Hopefully.
I hope so.
Yeah. I mean, I think, all of our responses here are just like, I especially am, just kind of chuckling at your response, Ashara, with like, it's all material. I'm like, yes, exactly. And, even as we're talking about indigo and textile and the African diaspora, right now I'm curating a show called The Indigo Project at SOMARTS. And so I'm really looking at like this relationship to indigo as like a seed, as an economic force, as like a social cue of like being dope. Like I'm really loving looking at like the 2000s denim on denim fits. And I remember like being a kid and being like, oh my God, I would never wear denim on denim. And now I'm just like, I'm denim down. And I'm also just sitting really deeply with what Adebunmi is saying about like when the archive failed, I went to the earth and like I returned to like the actual technology of like our DNA and like how that can't be dismissed. And right now I'm currently working on a sculpture that is reminiscent of like a Zangbeto, which is a kind of spiritual disruptor indicator of an energy from the West African Yoruban people and the Egun tribe specifically. And right now I'm working a lot with red clay and like actually like digging deep into the soil here and like cultivating clay. And what's been happening for me is that I'm realizing a lot about like how we actually like connect to material. Like before the internet was the internet, there was already like this connection that has manifested as like Wi-Fi, but that's always been there. And for me, I personally feel like a lot of that is found in the earth, like, not to get too hippie, but it's like, we're really downloading things when we sit in the sun. And I can feel the way that this process is like shifting me and also like unlocking a lot about my memory. And so I guess my next question is open to whoever would like to respond next is, How do you relate to memory personally, on a personal level? And if that personal level is different, how do you relate to it in like your art practice? So like, what is memory doing for you lately?
I guess back in 2020, well, everyone knows what 2020, what happened in 2020. But that year kind of ushered in a lot of death. Like my mom passed, my grandfather passed, my uncle passed, all within a couple of months of each other. My mom actually died of COVID. So I didn't realize, like a year, like now 2 years from that, I'm realizing how much my practice is like engaged with like memory and memorialization. But in 2020 was like, in deep grief, I decided like maybe this is a good time to visit True Blue Cemetery, which sits in the greater True Blue plantation where my ancestors were enslaved, and a lot of them are currently buried in that cemetery. And I have a cousin who's kind of been caring for the cemetery, Jackie Whitmore. So, and I kind of, sorry for people who live in the South, but the South scares me. So I was like very grateful to know that I could connect with a family member. So when we were driving to the plantation, I was just really struck to see how kind of there was like, first off, True Blue was an indigo and rice plantation, and now it grows cotton. So even like kind of the vestiges of what this land produced for centuries was erased, and which made way for like this cotton farm. And beyond that, I felt like the land presented like no real acknowledgement or memory of my ancestors, who literally defined that land. Like without them, this True Blue farm plantation would never have existed. And so much of True Blue plantation is just acres and acres of cotton fields. And as you get deeper in, there's a woodland, and that's where the cemetery sits. And there's, because of the kind of work of my cousin Jackie and Benny, they've been caring for this cemetery. So they built steps so that like the descendants of this space could actually access the cemetery. They've cleared out fallen trees that have like just engulfed and covered headstones. There's weeds that are like taller than us that they pulled back and maintained, but like kind of the beginning of this cemetery. And also after emancipation, my family continued to bury there. So there's this lineage of that, and there's like this still, like it's still an active cemetery. But as you get deeper into this woodland, headstones from 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 300 years ago are kind of completely lost to the land. And I guess in that moment, thinking a lot about what is lost, while also dealing with loss. It was on that trip I buried some of my mom's ashes on the cemetery. So I was like directly dealing with loss while thinking about what is lost to this land, like and I guess like what I was saying before, when things are failing, when history when history has failed to capture the memory of us, or the our presence, our humanity, our contributions. I guess in that moment, I was thinking the memory, or us in general, is in this land. And quite literally, my ancestors are in that land. And thinking about how the land becomes this repository for memory. And that was really the beginning of my series, using the very soil that my ancestors were buried in, the very soil that they were enslaved on, as a way of kind of trying to get to memory. As you know, and I used that soil and made it into, I mean, it's already literally kind of clay, it's red clay. But I took the soil and learned how to make it into viable clay to make ceramic sculpture. So this new series, and like even the work that's currently at the Met, is made of the land of at True Blue Plantation. And I think now, kind of reflecting, I feel like a show like that, you like just really reflect on like the journey of how you got there. And I'm realizing like my practice, as much as it's a practice engaged in memory and erasure, I'm realizing more and more that it's a practice engaged in grief, and kind of the remembrance, or the remembrance of my family, you know, who recently died, and the ones who, you know, and the ancestors, the ones who've died long before them.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm also thinking a lot right now, like, so like as a person who works primarily with like film and photography, like it's interesting because I'm also Haitian, and an Asian person, we have like a really complicated relationship with like cameras. Because of the way that like, if you like what happens whenever you Google image Haiti, right? And it's really interesting because when I was living in Haiti for a while, I had a teacher named Granzana, and she is like, or she passed away shortly, like 2 years ago, actually. And she was like teaching me as like a voodoo mambo priestess, but also as a self-initiated anthropologist, right? Like she would go out into like the interior of Haiti. I was living in Jacmel, which is like pretty popular, but not one of the most popular cities in Haiti. But she would go like within the city, like to the inner country, and she would like ask and sit at the feet of older Haitian country people, and she would like talk to them to gather the languages, the parts of the Haitian language that had been forgotten. And it would literally just be through like having coffee with people. And she would always tell me like, you can learn a lot from having some coffee with people, right? And then I'm like fast forwarding to now where like I'm working with friends, and a lot of us are working with like the archives, and a lot of my films, I'm like challenging the archive. I'm like, this ain't true. And one of the things that Granzana would always tell me is that like, if you need to look at like the truth of Haitian history, you don't necessarily Google it. You look to the songs of voodoo, because they'll tell you what Dessalines was doing the night that he went out to fight. They'll tell you where he went And even now, like, I think like, I haven't done it in a while, but like 2 years ago, I was like Googling information about Bwakaima, which is like, I'm obsessed with this ceremony. It's the spiritual ceremony that initiated the Haitian Revolution. And whenever you Google it on Wikipedia, they like translate the name to like, they use like a French translation. And the French translation is something like a crocodile, like it's like at the crocodile swamp. But actually, the actual name, whenever you separate it from the colonialized terms, it's actually Bwakaima. It's the woods at Iman's house. And Iman was the voodoo priest who was like leading the Haitian Revolution, who's known as Bookman, because he was actually an initiated like Muslim and a practitioner of Islam. And so I'm thinking a lot about like this truth telling and like how, you know, as an Asian American person, so much of my truth telling comes from me sitting down and talking to people. So much of the archive is me having to like go to my grandma's house and like look through like the burnt encrusted pictures and to like ask my cousin a question, but he might tell me half of the story. And then I ask someone else and then they tell me another story. And then someone else completely debunks that, but it's all true, right? Because truth is this fact that truth is compounded. And, you know, I know we don't have that much time, but I did want to come into this question about the archive, especially for you, April, because your power of portraiture and also, I hope this doesn't come off as offensive because I really mean it lovingly. Like, I feel like it's a tinge of sarcasm with your work. And you're like, no, I'm definitely being sarcastic. I think like it has so much, it says so much about the archive for you to say, hey, look, like I'm actually going to take a picture of my friend who's taking a picture of me. And so I'm just curious about that process. And if you have any thoughts about memory keeping and archiving within specifically, especially the Atlantica series, which I really love, and I loved listening to your interviews about it. So do you have any response for that very winded question?
Such a fun question too. So my work is all based on the memory of the story my father told to make up this planet. And also I'm trying really hard now to not forget who I was before I knew better, or who I was, the way I was and the way I thought before I learned something new, because sometimes we forget that and like we just throw it away and we think, oh, I've always known how television is shot, but no, you didn't. There was like a really innocent moment where like you might have thought that people were actually in the TV, and sometimes those innocent moments of ignorance are quite beautiful and sweet. Archiving and satire and tongue-in-cheek is like a big part of my work, because some of the things I tackle in my work seem so ridiculous at this point, you know, like, and if I were an alien observing Earth, I would think that gender is like so old school. Like, how are we still talking about sexual orientations at this point? Like, how do you still have just one genital? Or like, you know, it's like some aspects of how we still, these rules and protocols we still have is just so tired. And so like, sometimes I have to make fun of like colonialism. Like there's been so much written about it, so much art created about it. So like as an alien coming here fresh, not knowing what it is, and then learning what it is, it's ridiculous. And so like, how can I turn it into thread and make something out of it? Because obviously you guys have too much of it here. So it's like, that's where the satire and humor comes in, because it gets exhausting to cry. You know, it gets exhausting to die. It gets exhausting to deal with and put up with lack of control, oftentimes over your own body, over the people you love and their safety. So that comes up in my work a lot, also to entice people to get closer so they can see what it is and see that it isn't a joke. So I think that's pretty much where memory mostly comes into my work.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for that. And then my last question is to you, Ashara. And it's because I'm really in love with your visual arts practice as well. And I'm thinking about this series that you're working on now on femme distortion. And, you know, whenever I hear the word distortion, I also automatically think about memory and how relative that is. And so I'm curious about the series that you're currently working on, and has anything been born, or what has been born of that? Because I know there's been some things.
Memory is the majority fuel for my practice, actually. It is deeply rooted in the archive. So not only investigating and digging through the archive, like I'm a digger, like, you know, and that comes partially from growing up in Detroit, in a musical city where we went to the record store on Saturday, and you dig, you know, you get the new record. And if you're lucky, you get the poster on the wall that they're about to throw away anyway, but you dig. And so I'm very focused on the stories of Black women of all genders, of Black women and femme creative artists. I'm deeply interested in how we store that information, sometimes unintentionally, how that information and how the remedy is often passed down non-verbally inside of Black women's homes. I have yet to walk into a Black woman's house and there not be an altar there. They may not call it an altar. They may not know that they've created an altar, but there is an altar. And so I'm interested in excavating those archives and expanding them and also adding to them. I think that one of the pieces that's most important about Salt to Catch Ghosts is that each person has created something that has been deposited into a container, and that the material of salt itself is a preservative, right? It's philosophically and literally, physically a preservative. And what does that mean for us to also be cleared and cleansed by that, and then kind of like made ready to receive the next piece of information that Black women are giving us. I remember when April first said, you know, yes, I'll be in the show. She told me that the piece was like ready in April because you were so busy. She was so busy like creating for so many solo shows. It was like, no, the show's not till September, but oh, your piece is ready. This is the piece for your show. It's for you, and it's in the archive. It's waiting for you. So let me know when you're ready for it. And so it was like, okay, it's already been created. I'm interested in how, April, like you decided what was for this show, like why that piece, why, you know, it's so perfect and flamboyant. I'm interested in how memory for me as growing up and having a life as a Black girl child, a dark-skinned Black girl child in a Black city, the impact of that memory had on me and my need to return to it, that I haven't lived in Detroit, Michigan since I was a teenager, and then lived in Denver, Colorado for 29 years, and then lived in Oakland for 12 years, and now have returned to Detroit. So when I go back, when I'm at home in Detroit, it's like, it's not the place that I remember. The people that are there are different. You know, some people are still there, but there's like less than 1 million people live in a very, very large place. And so the memory of driving through and like remembering streets, but not having really a context as an adult to what that means, it's like I'm in a new place. So I get to hear these stories from other Black women artists who are giving me the history of a city I grew up in that I didn't know. And so the impact of that on my curatorial practice is huge right now. And my desire and honestly my need to kind of like pull the thread across the continent, across the North American continent, from California to Denver to Chicago to Detroit to New York and back. What stories are part of my memory of growing up, listening to that music and, really just understanding myself as a child of the world. I didn't feel bound at all by it. So, these pieces, again, these threads, these twists and ties and bound, these lots of stories that are offered to us because of your labor, because of your embodied practice. The memory part is like, it's in the present. It's the Afro present, right? The Afro past, the Afro present, and the Afro future is like simultaneously in motion, in flow, as part of this conversation for me and my work.
Yeah. Well, thanks y'all for being in conversation with the bulk of my questions. I'm now gonna open it up to the audience. So for those of y'all who might not have seen the chat, I did ask for folks to start asking their questions in the chat. And I'd actually like to invite some folks' voices in. And so you always have the right to pass if you don't want to be on camera or if you don't want to unmute. I'm happy to read your message. But for now, I'd like to invite Rosa Cabrera to unmute and maybe ask your question, please.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, Rosa.
Hey. I'm like, why you say my name like that? Hey.
Spotlight you.
Wow. I am just so inspired by the brilliant minds and hearts and spirits in the space. And it just made me wonder, what does it mean to be in the body that is creating this brilliant work? I think I'm a writer, and I think about, I'm thinking a lot about what kind of space, or what are some of my needs, the needs that I have that I'm aware of, that I'm not aware of, around what makes it possible for me to create writing. And sometimes it's like, I need to be in a body that feels like there's an urgency in order for me to create. Or sometimes it's like, I need to feel like I'm only surrounded by ocean sound in order for all the stuff in my body to come out and land. And I'm wondering if y'all have any rituals for protecting the parts of you that hold the capacity for you to create. And just what does it feel like to be in your body as you're creating? I hope that made sense.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in on that one. So what it's like to be in my body while I'm creating, I'm in a lot of pain all the time because I have lupus. And a couple of years ago, it got really bad and I was in the ICU. And so when I came out on the other side of that, I was disabled and had to learn to walk again. And so now it's to be able to make my work, I have to have very strict boundaries. When it comes to traveling, when it comes to the vendors I work with, it's all the way down to how do they package the art materials, and am I able to open it on my own, or do I have to wait for my studio assistant to open it for me? It's these little things, and then having to explain that to galleries, to institutions that want me to fly out and explain what that entails. And so it was on the other side of that major medical trauma, I was very shocked at how much it took away from my body to make work, but also very happy that I was able to translate and articulate what my body needed on the other side of that to continue to make work, and also be humble and accept help. I'm a January Capricorn, and I have a really hard time relinquishing control. And so like, there's nothing that's going to sit you down real quick than your body just being like, I'm not going to work. Like, you need to go sit down, you need to go lay down. And it's increased the love in my relationships now that people are able to help me. But that's what it's like for me. So any piece that is finished is like, I see it in a show and I'm like, that took out my big toenail because I couldn't lift the piece and I tried to lift it on my own. And I can see where I got lazy and tired with that with that stitching, with the 12 inches of stitching on that side. So that I'm able to make work, I'm very grateful for with this body.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Isha, for that question, to be an artist who is also a curator is a very heavy responsibility, and I feel it in my body. I feel the weight of it, and often because I'm also an organizer, there are expectations that are placed on me, sometimes quite unrealistic, and also, I don't even know what the expectations are, but I feel the weight of it. And so, one of the ways in which I've had to be quite disciplined to take care of myself is around sleep and dream time, and making sure that I go to sleep. I do a lot of work and processing in that liminal space right before you wake up, in that trance space. You're not quite awake. I can work things out and get like the answers, downloaded, because I take some time to like go to sleep, and I take time to like not set an alarm that's going to shock me awake. And so, so that's one of the things Rosetta answered, to kind of speak to your question around it. The other piece is having to be very clear about not caring what other people think about me. It's a psychological, emotional, spiritual, and physical release. It's like, it's like you can only do what you can do, and you need to do what makes you happy, and you need to do what brings you joy and what allows me to feel free. And so in that there's some liberation in that, and then I'd say the third part of that, which is connected to it, is I have a very long and deep meditation practice. And there was an eclipse 2 days ago, but there was also an eclipse a week ago. And I was out at the beach and started going into anaphylactic shock and had to walk very quickly from a very long way at the water at the Pacific Ocean back to my artist residency to find Benadryl in my own bag, and then have someone drive me to the hospital. And it was, had I not had that meditation practice, I would not be sitting here with you all today, because I was able to calm myself, to slow my breathing, and to slow my heart rate while that medicine did what it did to keep my airway open. And it's just, so the breath and the meditation and the slowing down and the demand that I rest, which is not what society says that I get to do, is very much what I demand that I get to do. So that saying, can't stop, won't stop, it's like, will stop and do stop. Stop. Just slow down and breathe slowly.
Also, I love working with you. So I do want to be honorable of folks' times. And so I would like to say, for folks who have to leave, please do. Adebunmi and April, Do you guys have time for one more question? It's the second part of this question. Okay. The second part of the question, unfortunately, I'm going to, guys, we are running out of time to be here on the Zoom at least. So the second part of the question is, what is the biggest thing, thought, narrative, habit, etc., that you have had to shed to fully enter your role as an artist? And this is from Natalia. So what is the biggest thing you have had to shed to fully enter your role as an artist?
I guess fear. I pronounce like EA words hardly and like EER word, but fear. I guess also around the time of like entering art school, I went through like a period where for like 2 years I didn't make any art. I've always been an artist. Like my first time making art was at 3. But I now like reflecting on that, you know, you learn about art in like your high school classes, you learn about it in your college classes, and you often are shown the finished, like perfect product. And not necessarily always the process to get there. And I think because of that, it created a lot of fear in me that the work had to be perfect, or it had to be like this, it had to show this like perfect, my craft and my, basically it had to be perfect. And because of that, I guess it paralyzed me. And for 2 years, I didn't make work. And I guess the more, especially since it happened around that time or right before I made that shift using Black hair, and to me, especially like in the context of art school, there's not a lot of examples or hardly any. And like at that time, I didn't even know about the work ignorantly of David Hammond's. But there was like no examples, or I didn't know at that time, like what were the possibilities of this material. And I think making that shift from these like paint or like traditional like forms of medium where we're often fed this like perfect example of what these materials could become. And now I had this material where I didn't know what it could become. I think it kind of freed me of that like paralyzing fear to put less emphasis on what it could be and just put more emphasis on the process. And I think in that space, I really started defining how the process relates to the context, and just putting more emphasis on the process. And that also became a practice of experimentation and discovery, and and remembrance and all these other things. And it became, I guess, what that kind of process of discovery and remembrance and failure, embracing failure, what that would take me to, and being okay with not knowing where it will take me to. So I think I guess I just had to like embrace failure, and it helped me like kind of let go fear.
Okay, better preach. Talk about I'm gonna embrace failure and let go of fear. I think, yeah, that's so powerful. And for me too, like right now, I'm learning how to release my understanding of time. Especially now, like as I was just mentioning, Granzana, like that was something I was working with her in like 2018. And now I'm seeing how, like, and I was patient with it, like, like.
Oh, did Isha freeze for everyone?
I think Isha's frozen. But that's what happens when you're in Brazil. I'm not sure what she's going to do, what they're going to do, but maybe April, you can answer the question and we'll figure it out. Isha will figure it out and they'll come back.
Yeah. So the question was, what is the
What did
biggest?
you had to release? What did you need to release?
Let go to be an
Welcome.
artist.
Sorry about that, y'all.
Oh, you're there.
Talking about releasing time. That was the longest 3 seconds of my life this week.
Oh, there you are. Okay. April was just about to answer the question.
Oh, please do, please do.
Trying to make everyone happy. And comparing myself to others. When I was starting out, I was like, why am I not getting a studio visit for that show? I make work in this realm, and why is it? I felt really impatient, and didn't really start doing well until I, mind my business, stay in my studio and work on my art, because like sometimes we feel like we are entitled to things, but it's not our time. Or we're not quite there yet. And it took me a while to give that stubborn way of looking at other artists, or even having the mindset to look outside of what I have to be minding my business to do. And it happened after my medical trauma. So it's like, once that happened, I was like, no is my favorite word. And it's a complete sentence. No matter how much I want to travel or do this, I have to take care of myself and not compare myself to other people that come from different backgrounds, have different privileges, have different struggles and limitations. And that was very difficult because the art world is very big, but it's very small. And it's hard because, we're artists and we're sensitive about our stuff, our art. And so it's like, it's hard not to look at someone sitting next to you and seeing what they're doing. And to this day, I still do. But instead, I'm like, wow, like that's obviously something I'm attracted to. So like, how can I get like that or bring it into my own practice or collaborate with them and make them even bigger or make us even bigger, bang together to make boom. And that's what struggled. That was my biggest struggle, that once I got rid of that and just focused on my own practice, I started feeling and doing a lot better.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, we are coming to a close, y'all. I really want to thank everyone. Again, a special thank you to April Bey for being here. Adebunmi, thank you so much. Ashara, thank you so much. And to everyone who's joining, I hope that you all are able to take a deep breath here. I hope that you all remember that the Salt to Catch a Ghost exhibition is still up and at Flash Gallery. Anna will tell you guys the gallery hours that I've forgotten from the top of my head. But it's still up until December 17th. And I promise you, just stepping into the space, you're going to feel a huge energy. And once again, a big thank you to Chef Bryant Terry and 4 Color Books for sponsoring this conversation. and of course to Slash. So Anna, please do close us out.
Thank you, April, Adebunmi, and Ashara for your generous participation, and Isha for guiding this incredible conversation. Thank you so much. It really has been an honor to work with all of you. And thank you to the audience for tuning in tonight. Yes, the exhibition is on view through December 17th, and we're open Thursday through Saturdays, 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. And I also want to make sure to mention that our upcoming party, which Slash is co-hosting with Ashara Ekundayo and Erica Demon, to celebrate Salt to Catch Ghosts and Black Space Residency. And it will be on December 10th. And the evening will include an artist talk by Salt to Catch Ghosts artists and Black Space Residency alumni, along with Small Bites and Martini Toast. And we'll also be releasing the Salt to Catch Ghost catalog there. So I know a lot of the audience is tuning in from all over, but we'll hope to see many of you there. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
What a beautiful evening.
Thank
Good
you.
to see you.
Bye.
Bye.